You're a disgrace to the family, being a middle school graduate brother-in-law. Just go home. Today is my beloved little sister's wedding. After losing both our parents one after the other when we were young, we survived by leaning on each other. Now that she's finally getting married and starting her own family, I couldn't be happier. The bride and groom welcomed the guests with warm smiles. As I watched them from a distance, tears welled up in my eyes without me realizing it. Their warmth and happiness filled my heart with a gentle, peaceful feeling. Then, the reception began. As I made my way to the family's table, I saw a nameplate on my seat that read, "Poor middle school graduate brother." The moment I saw it, my heart thumped loudly in my chest. Is this supposed to be about me? Who could do something so cruel? This is my sister's special day. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Even if this was someone's idea of a joke, if I stayed quiet, the ceremony would go on peacefully. Just as I was about to sit down, torn with mixed emotions, the groom whispered behind me, "We don't need a relative with only a middle school diploma in our elite family." Where did the smile go, the one he had when he was greeting guests at the entrance? Now, wearing a twisted, devilish grin, the groom looked down on me with contempt. This wasn't some tasteless prank. It was harassment, planned by the groom himself. Trying to cast me out, his wife's brother, is simply beyond comprehension. Then, from behind the groom, my sister slowly approached. The words that came out of her mouth were beyond anything I had expected. "My name is Samuel. I'm 33 years old. My father passed away when I was in elementary school. I was in 5th grade, and I couldn't accept the reality. I sulked through the entire funeral. Maybe I wasn't sad. I was angry instead. My father had promised to take me fishing that weekend. But instead, he came back pale and cold. Why? Isn't a man's promise supposed to be sacred? I could feel the tears coming. But I refused to cry. I kept thinking about how he used to say with a smile, "A man always keeps his promises." Dad, what about our promise? Don't go to heaven without keeping your word to me. That thought kept running through my mind. My mother was exhausted, and my little sister Mary was only 3. We had no grandparents, and no relatives nearby to help. From that moment, I made up my mind that I would take my father's place and support my mother and Mary. My mother worked herself to the bone, from morning until night, for the sake of me and my sister. She was always so tired that I felt guilty even trying to talk to her. It was painfully clear that we were struggling, both financially and emotionally. "Samuel, I'm sorry." That was her constant phrase. Even though I wasn't really sacrificing anything, she always worried about me, saying, "I'm sorry I can't send you to tutoring. I'm sorry this is all we have for dinner." But those weren't the words I wanted to hear. All I wanted was to see her and Mary smiling together. But I was just too young to truly support her back then. Right after I started my 2nd year of high school, my mother fell ill and passed away suddenly. Even the day before she collapsed, she had worked late into the night and came home just before midnight. The next morning, something unusual happened. My mother, who was always up early, had overslept. I was never good at waking up on my own, so she usually woke me. Because she overslept that day, I woke up just moments before I would have been late. I rushed to get ready, and in my frustration, I took my anger out on her. "Come on, why didn't you wake me up earlier?" Without even looking at her as she tried to respond, I ran out the door. That was the last conversation I ever had with my mother. Why did I speak to her like that? What was it she wanted to say to me in that moment? The more I think about it, the more I'm hit by how immature I was. I had never once looked my mother in the eye and thanked her properly. Every time I imagine how she must have felt that morning, the regret grows heavier in my mind. The doctor told me that if she had gone to the hospital sooner, she might have been saved. If only I had noticed the changes in her condition. If only I had faced her more closely, maybe things would have turned out differently. Mary was still only in 3rd grade at the time. They suggested we go into a foster facility, but when I realized we might be separated, I made the decision to drop out of high school and work. Mary was so helpless in everything, and there was no one else but me to protect her. The landlord of our apartment, understanding our situation, let us stay there, which gave me the final push to make up my mind. My mother, who had been struggling just to keep us afloat, had no insurance and barely any savings. If I hadn't worked, we wouldn't have made it through the month. I was overwhelmed. Still, no matter how much I thought about it, hunger didn't wait. As long as we were alive, we needed money. I decided to work as hard as I could so that Mary wouldn't have to suffer anymore. My homeroom teacher in my second year was Mr. Smith. He was stern and not easy to approach. I wasn't particularly good at school, but I wasn't constantly failing either, just an average student with an unremarkable school life. I had hardly spoken to Mr. Smith. He had never praised me or scolded me directly. Our relationship was simply that of a student and their homeroom teacher. He wasn't cold, but he didn't show emotions openly, and he wasn't the kind to casually chat with students. When I went to tell Mr. Smith that I was leaving school after my mother passed away, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I see. Samuel, I was really hoping you would stay in school. Couldn't you spend the next 2 years in a foster facility?" His words truly surprised me, as I had always believed our relationship was so distant that he might not even have known who I was. And then he added, "You've got talent in drawing. There are plenty of art schools you could go to after graduation," which surprised me even more. He knew about my love for drawing better than I ever imagined. I only drew cartoons and sketches for friends now and then, but knowing he had seen that and acknowledged it made me really happy. Still, for me, school was far down on my list of priorities. My mission now was to make sure Mary had a full belly and could go to school with a smile. "Mr. Smith, I'm sorry. I've decided to get a job. I really appreciate all your suggestions, but I have to support my sister. If you happen to know of any job openings, I'd be really grateful. It would be hard to find a decent job with good conditions at this time of year, which was well outside the usual hiring season. But I needed money to live. I had to find work." "Understood. I'll reach out to some places. If you're going to work, it should be somewhere your strengths can shine." True to his word, he reached out to various people. One of the places he introduced me to was a local dyeing workshop. It was an old, established workshop, just a short bike ride from our apartment. It wasn't quite the type of job I had imagined, but with Mr. Smith's strong recommendation, I accepted the offer. It was my first step into the working world. I had nothing on my resume except dropping out of high school and no real experience with art. I was deeply anxious about whether they would accept someone like me. But the people at the workshop were kind. When I explained why I was working there, some of them even shed tears. At first, all I did was chores, but watching patterns and colors being applied to plain fabric fascinated me. They told me to learn design and techniques by watching, so I made sure to study the experienced workers closely during every spare moment I had. The weather and humidity can have a big impact on the dye, so you must never overlook even the slightest change. As he said that, his serious gaze fixed on the fabric as he applied the color with expert precision, and I truly thought from the bottom of my heart that I wanted to become someone like him one day. Meanwhile, my sister Mary had withdrawn completely since our mother passed away. She stopped going to school and barely spoke to me, only saying the bare minimum. I completely understood how she felt, especially because she had loved our mother so deeply. Accepting reality must have been impossible for her. I had also lost our father when I was in 5th grade, so I knew exactly how that kind of grief felt. So I let her be, giving her space and freedom to feel however she needed to. Of course, I still reached out from time to time, though whether or not she responded depended entirely on her mood. Whenever she did want to talk, I listened patiently and without interruption. Eventually, she began to adjust to our life together, started going back to school, and began helping more with household chores. Although my wages were far below what a typical family earned, The workshop owner's wife and coworkers always shared leftovers and groceries with me after work, which helped a lot with food expenses. Our next-door landlord loved baking bread and often left a whole loaf of homemade bread hanging from our doorknob. Mary was naturally good with her hands and could quickly whip up an omelet with whatever was in the fridge, or make sandwiches using the bread we received. She had learned laundry and cleaning from our mother, so our home was always tidy and comfortable. As she got older and moved on to middle school and high school, her classmates all seemed to live with both parents, received generous allowances, and went out for fun after school. I often felt guilty that I couldn't give her that kind of life. She probably wanted to go to karaoke after school or hang out at family restaurants like her friends did. But instead, Mary came home, took care of the chores, and always sat down at her desk to study. When I returned home from work, she would be there, focused under a single desk lamp, still studying hard. "I'm home. Mary, you've been studying in the dark again? If a burglar broke in, it could be dangerous, so turn on the lights, okay?" When I said that, she jumped in surprise. "Ah, you scared me." "Oh, it's already dark outside. Let's eat." She had been so focused she hadn't noticed the sun had gone down. "I know you're a little scatterbrained sometimes, but I really worry about you. Burglars, kidnappers." Before I could finish, she said, "You're so overprotective, Samuel." "I'll be fine. Besides, the landlord's right next door. If a burglar knew that, they wouldn't dare come near us, right?" And began heating up the dinner she had prepared. I knew I was being overprotective. As she grew older and more kind and beautiful, I couldn't help but worry about her. I tried to shield her from getting hurt or going down the wrong path. Mary understood better than anyone that we came from a very different kind of household, which is exactly why I didn't want her to feel like she had to hold back. I wanted her to enjoy the same kinds of fun experiences as her friends. But with my current wages, giving her any more allowance just wasn't possible. So I often found myself saying, "Sorry, Mary," without even meaning to. It was the same phrase our mother used to say to me back when I was in high school. Now I understood just how she must have felt. And there was one more thing I was working hard toward for Mary. I was saving up for her college education. If I had dropped out of high school without any plan and entered society with nothing but a middle school education, I might have been treated unfairly or bullied. Thanks to Mr. Smith, I had the chance to work at a good dyeing workshop, but that was just luck. I had been fortunate to be surrounded by kind people. I didn't want Mary to ever suffer because of her education level. And Mary was a hard worker. She had the determination to sit at her desk and study every day. "Samuel, once I graduate from high school, I'll start working, okay? That way things will get easier for us. Let's keep doing our best together." She said she wouldn't go to college for my sake. "Mary, deep down you want to go to college, don't you? You're working this hard at your studies, and there's no way I'm letting you go straight to work. I'm sure Mom and Dad are watching from heaven and hoping you'll keep going." I had always prioritized Mary's feelings, but college was the one thing I refused to compromise on. Even though she looked conflicted, she never stopped studying. And then came the day the public college results were announced. We stood together in front of our parents' altar, hands joined in prayer, hoping for good news. "Please let Mary pass. She's worked harder than anyone, helped more around the house than anyone, and loves her family more than anyone." That was the prayer I repeated silently. And the result was that she passed. It was the happiest moment of my life. Mary studied diligently throughout her 4 years of college and graduated with excellent grades. She secured a job at a major bank. "From now on, I'm going to earn a lot and make your life easier, Samuel." Hearing her say that brought me to the verge of tears. I was deeply moved by her words, and I was genuinely happy that Mary had fulfilled everything I had once dreamed of, going to college and joining a big company. On top of that, something wonderful happened at the dyeing workshop where I worked. "Samuel, you're serious about your work, and I've seen how closely you've learned from the senior craftsman. I think it's time you try making one on your own. One of the senior craftsmen, who had always looked out for me, gave me those encouraging words. Up until then, I had helped with tasks and worked under guidance, but this was the first time I'd be allowed to handle everything from the design to the dyeing all by myself. From among the designs I had been sketching and saving over time, I chose one that was inspired by my feelings for Mary and began working. My designs always carry an expression of sorrow. Some of the senior craftsmen didn't look too fondly on that, but for me, everything I create starts from a place of sadness. Still, sadness fades with time and gives way to joy. I wanted people to feel that story through my work. My first completed piece was the one I hoped to buy myself and give to Mary as a gift. Even if only a few people understood it, that was fine. What mattered most was that the piece reached Mary. That thought alone carried me through the process. The finished work was introduced on the workshop's social media account as the first piece by our new dyeing artisan. That account only had about 10 followers, mostly staff and their families, but I was proud to have officially debuted as a dyeing artisan. 3 years passed. Mary moved out of the home we had always shared and started living on her own. I stayed behind in the apartment, partly because it was close to my workplace, and also because our landlord had injured his back the previous year. I stayed to help with things like replacing fluorescent lights in the hallway or doing minor repairs. Seeing Mary stand on her own 2 feet brought me relief, but also, maybe because I had acted as a parent figure, I felt a deep sense of loneliness. One day, Mary contacted me. "Samuel, there's someone I want to marry. He's a senior colleague at the bank. I'd like to introduce him to you. Is that okay?" I replied. "Oh, of course. I see. Mary is getting married, huh?" And nearly broke into tears over the phone. I couldn't let her see me like that in person. "If you cry again, my friends will say you're too overprotective, Samuel," she teased with a laugh. As her big brother who had taken on the role of a parent, I knew I had to take a good look at this man myself. With that thought in mind, the day of our meeting arrived. The location was a high-end restaurant near the station. I had never set foot in a place like that before, so I was nervous the whole time. When I was shown to my seat, a beautiful view stretched out beyond the window. It was a busy day, but inside the restaurant, the calm atmosphere felt completely removed from the noise outside. I usually spend my days working in traditional workwear, but wearing the custom-tailored suit I had splurged on made me feel like I could convincingly play the part of someone who truly belonged in a place like this. As I sat there with nothing to do, glancing around nervously while waiting for the two of them, I spotted Mary at the entrance, smiling and waving at me. I instinctively stood up and waved back. When Mary was in middle school, I once waved back at her without thinking, and she got mad, saying, "Stop it. That's so embarrassing." When I asked why, she said it was because the way I waved looked too girly and she didn't like it. I thought I had messed up again today, but once the hand was raised, it was too late. Still, today she seemed in a great mood and didn't care about any of that. Maybe it was because of the handsome young man standing right beside her. "Sorry for the wait. The taxi got stuck in a little traffic," she said as they approached. I stood up to greet them. "No worries. I haven't been waiting long," I replied. "Nice to meet you. I'm Benjamin. I'm sorry for the late introduction. I've been in a relationship with Mary for quite some time now," the man beside her said politely. "Likewise. Thank you for taking such good care of Mary. Please have a seat. Standing here talking isn't very practical." The three of us sat down, and as the waiter came by to take our drink orders, the tension started to ease, and smiles began to appear. At first glance, he looked clean-cut and had a refreshing presence. His bright, confident way of speaking and dazzling smile left a strong, positive impression. Once the drinks arrived, and we made a toast, I asked the one question I had been meaning to ask. "Benjamin, what was it about Mary that made you fall for her?" Mary, caught off guard by my sudden and direct question, blushed and exclaimed, "What are you saying, Samuel? Don't ask stuff like that here. It's embarrassing. Benjamin responded with a calm smile. Well, it's her kindness and how caring she is. I work in corporate banking, so I'm very particular about my appearance. Mary noticed that one of the buttons on my sleeve was coming loose and quietly mended it for me. Listening to him share this story with pride made me smile. It was so typical of Mary. I remembered how, one winter, she had quietly fixed a loose button on my coat without saying a word. As I listened, memories of moments with Mary filled my mind. I asked her if she always paid that much attention to everyone's appearance, and she just said, "Only when I notice." But when I looked at her sewing kit, I saw clear signs that it had been used often. That moment made me realize just how thoughtful and genuine she is. I was truly drawn to that side of her. His words about Mary's gentle heart nearly brought tears to my eyes. I've always known that Mary was incredibly considerate, and on top of that, modest enough never to show it off. I was genuinely impressed that Benjamin seemed to have a good eye for people. Smiles filled the table, and for a marriage introduction, the atmosphere felt surprisingly warm and relaxed. But just as we reached the middle of the course meal, Benjamin suddenly asked me a question about myself. "By the way, Mr. Sullivan, which college did you graduate from? I heard Mary attended a public college and had excellent grades. I assume you also went to a public college? I've heard you're quite intelligent." It was clear Benjamin assumed I had also gone to college. There was nothing for me to hide, so I answered honestly. In terms of education, I only completed middle school. I had to drop out of high school in my second year after our mother passed away. Since then, I've been working and raising my sister with everything I had. As soon as I said that, the smile Benjamin had been wearing quietly faded. It was something only I, sitting directly across from him, could have noticed. Mary's eyes were fixed on her white fish moinier, because she was struggling to cut it with her knife and fork. For a few seconds, his smile vanished, and then he seemed to catch himself and quickly put it back on. But the smile he forced wasn't the bright, sunny one from earlier, and it felt strained and artificial. "So, I see. Ha ha ha, that must have been tough." His words felt so scripted and devoid of emotion that a sense of unease stirred in my chest. But Mary didn't seem to notice at all, smiling playfully as she said, "My big brother can be a bit clumsy and overprotective, but he's a hard worker, and more than anything, he's the one who raised me. I'm really grateful to him," while Benjamin sat beside her with a smile that looked more pasted on than real. After that, Benjamin quickly wrapped up the meal, and the meeting came to an end as he hurried to leave. "I, have some urgent work," he muttered, standing up and hurrying the meeting to an end. "Mary probably has plans too, so let's go," he said, then forced her to stand up and head toward the exit, even though she seemed like she wanted to say something. Without so much as a proper goodbye, I was left sitting there alone. In the end, I never had another chance to speak with or see Benjamin again before the wedding, and the strange feeling I had during that first meeting never went away. Still, I honestly couldn't decide whether I should bring it up to Mary in advance. I tried to get a sense of Benjamin's character through her, but her eyes were constantly sparkling with love, and I couldn't get the kind of insight I was looking for. People often talk about pre-wedding jitters, but in Mary's case, it was the opposite. She was in full-on marriage-happy mode. I had known from the beginning that she would appear in a wedding dress, then change into a colored gown and one of the kimono I had designed. It made me genuinely happy that she chose my kimono for such an important day. As the wedding drew closer, Mary started coming to my apartment to get my opinion on all sorts of wedding details. They included invitations, seating arrangements, gifts for guests, and more. "What do you think of this gift, Samuel? Does it look cheap? Do you think people will say we have no taste?" "Well, I think it's fine. You two decided on it together, right? I doubt anyone's going to say anything. Besides, you've already made your decision, so no need to ask me now, is there?" I couldn't help but wonder why Mary kept coming over to my apartment so often. But Mary said, "Yeah, but you know, I've always relied on you, Samuel, and we've always made decisions together. So even asking about little things like this makes me feel more at ease. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just coming over in a flurry of wedding excitement. She was leaning on me, the person who had raised her like a parent. Remembering what an unreliable stand-in parent I had been, I decided to keep talking things through with Mary until she felt completely satisfied. Until now, my days had been filled with work, and I usually spent my days off just sleeping. Had I ever really sat down with Mary to chat, joke around, or simply talk at length like this before? I found myself thinking, maybe this is what small happiness feels like. I felt like some old man nearing retirement. And so, like a father preparing to give his daughter away, I spent those last few days before the wedding laughing and talking with Mary. The day of the wedding, I walked down the aisle with Mary in the chapel and was so overwhelmed with emotion that I burst into tears. My vision blurred with tears, and I could hardly see how beautiful she looked. My shoulders trembled as I cried nonstop. After the chapel ceremony, it was time for the reception. As we moved to the new venue, I saw Mary and Benjamin greeting the guests with bright smiles at the entrance, and I couldn't help but smile too. To be surrounded by so many friends and colleagues offering their congratulations was truly a blessing. Mary had invited friends from our hometown, high school, and college, and they were all happily chatting and smiling. As someone who had stood in for our parents, I felt proud and deeply happy in that moment. When I went to take my seat, I saw a nameplate on my table that read, "Poor middle school graduate brother." I was stunned, my eyes wide, unable to do anything but stare at those cruel words. I couldn't believe something so harsh would appear at Mary's celebration. Why would a nameplate like this be at my seat? The shock hit harder than I expected, and my hands began to tremble. I had always tried to act like education didn't matter, but now I realize there are people in this world who see me exactly that way. As I stood there frozen, a voice called out from behind me. "Well, I never would have guessed you only had a middle school education, Mr. Sullivan," Benjamin said with a smug grin as he walked toward me. His expression was completely different from the cheerful smile he wore when welcoming guests, and his eyes were cold and malicious. Mary was still talking with her friends and hadn't noticed us. My family and relatives are all highly educated. They studied hard and went to top colleges. I was relieved when I heard Mary graduated from a public college, but having a brother-in-law with such low education is just embarrassing. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I stared at Benjamin, hoping it was some kind of sick joke. But judging by the look on his face, there was nothing joking about it. I couldn't even speak. All I had wanted was to see Mary happy. After losing both our parents, she had finally found joy and built a new family. I just wanted her to enter a warm, loving home, free of worry. I just wanted to celebrate this new chapter with her. Seeing that I said nothing, Benjamin began to press further, like a predator toying with its prey. "Even Mrs. Sullivan, the wife of our main bank's president, is here today. She's famous for rarely showing up to events, yet she's attending this one in person. It proves how respected I am among the top ranks. Having a brother-in-law with only a middle school education? That's a serious stain on my image." His voice grew louder as his excitement increased. Guests nearby started looking over with puzzled expressions. Mary, sensing something was wrong, rushed over and tried to stop him. "Benjamin, what are you doing? Come on, let's go. The ceremony's about to start." In a panic, Mary grabbed his arm and urged him toward the waiting room. But Benjamin shook her hand off and, wearing a twisted expression, snapped, "You feel the same way deep down, don't you? I'm just saying what you're too afraid to admit. Go on, say it. You're embarrassed to have a brother who are a middle school graduate, aren't you?" As Mary stared at him in utter disbelief. Then she noticed my nameplate, picked it up, and froze, her eyes wide in shock. Without a hint of remorse, Benjamin smirked proudly and said, "Today is the day we become a family. We need to start cutting off the people who aren't necessary. Samuel, let's go," Mary said as she grabbed my arm, and started to lead me toward the exit. Completely caught off guard by her action, Benjamin shouted, "Hey, what do you mean, let's go?" "Mary, wait a second," as he reached out to grab her arm. But his hand missed, swinging through empty air. Mary led me away from the venue, and we walked out together. The wedding reception quickly descended into chaos, and the ceremony was canceled. Benjamin flew into a rage, and Mary's phone rang constantly afterward. "Mary, are you sure about this? This is your special day. If you want to go back, now's the time. None of this would have happened if I had just ignored that nameplate and taken my seat. I'm really sorry," I said as we got into the taxi parked outside the wedding venue, and it began to drive off, a sudden wave of guilt washing over me for what I felt was a terrible mistake. I had ruined what should have been my precious sister's once-in-a-lifetime wedding. And it was all because of me. But Mary said, "It's not your fault, Samuel." I couldn't believe Benjamin would say something like that. I just couldn't forgive him. Today, I wanted to tell you how thankful I am for everything you've done. I never imagined it would end up like this. I'm really sorry. And while I was grateful to hear those words from her, I couldn't help but worry about what lay ahead. Mary and Benjamin worked at the same bank. Many of their supervisors and colleagues were in attendance as guests. After we walked out, I had no idea what kind of explanation Benjamin would give. One thing I knew for sure was that there was no chance he would tell the truth, and I couldn't stop worrying that Mary would end up being the one blamed. I might have to quit the bank, but after what he did to you, there's no way I could go through with the wedding smiling. So no, I don't regret it. As she spoke, staring out the window, I could only watch her profile in silence. As expected, after we left, Benjamin began telling people that Mary had suddenly walked out because of a selfish outburst. He insisted that it was entirely her fault and went as far as demanding that Mary and I cover the full cost of the venue and the cancellation fees. Once I returned home, I opened social media. I had already told my followers that my sister's wedding was happening. They had all been eagerly waiting for photos of the kimono I designed. Since many of them had been anticipating it since the day before, I felt I had to give them some kind of update. When I posted, "I'm sorry, the wedding has been canceled, and the kimono was never worn," questions immediately began pouring into the comment section. Why? Canceling a wedding is a serious matter. We'd really like to know what happened. I didn't think it was something to share openly, so I explained the situation in writing, limited to my membership-only followers. Everyone showed support for my sister's feelings, and comments flooded in like, "Your sister's actions are truly commendable," and "That groom is the worst." Absolutely unforgivable. The dyeing workshop where I work has now grown into a hugely popular studio with hundreds of thousands of followers. It all started when a post featuring the first kimono I completed on my own began to quietly gain attention, and word of mouth brought in more and more customers wanting to buy. Eventually, a group of dedicated fans who resonated with the story behind each piece began to form, and I launched a personal artisan account as well. Its name was Whispers from the Dying Artisan Sam. That account too surpassed 1 million followers and began attracting attention from overseas. Since I had never shown my face or revealed any personal information, the mystery only deepened, and the kimonos became known as rare, difficult to obtain pieces. The prices of my kimonos continued to rise steadily. I even received kind words from the wives of executives and bankers who said that wearing one of my kimonos had become a symbol of status. Among today's wedding guests, the only woman who wore one of my kimonos with true elegance was Mrs. Sullivan, the wife of the bank president. She was one of the very few people who knew both that I was Mary's brother and that I was the well-known dyeing artisan. That connection, too, had started purely by chance. When Mary and Benjamin went to deliver the wedding invitation to Mrs. Sullivan, they happened to see a photo displayed in her home that showed her wearing one of my kimonos. While Benjamin and Mr. Sullivan were talking for a moment, Mary quietly whispered to Mrs. Sullivan, "Actually, the person who made that kimono is my biker brother," letting the secret slip. She hadn't planned to say anything, But seeing how beautifully Mrs. Sullivan wore the kimono made her so happy that she couldn't help herself. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Sullivan exclaimed, "What? You mean your brother is going to be at the wedding too?" Visibly excited. "Of course, but my brother hasn't revealed his face or identity publicly, so we can't introduce him openly. But still, I'll make sure to tell him to greet you." When she heard that, Mrs. Sullivan's eyes sparkled as she said, "I get to talk to Sam. Oh wow, what should I do? To be honest, I'm not really good with weddings, so I usually turn them down. But if I have the chance to meet Sam, I would love to attend." Mrs. Sullivan, who's not only one of my biggest fans, but also a member of my private community, was furious when she learned what had happened between me and Benjamin. She had even written down her thoughts about the kimono pattern the night before, hoping to share them with me in person, and had practiced what she wanted to say. She had witnessed the situation from a distance, but couldn't hear what was being said. After we walked out, she heard Benjamin's version of events and returned home feeling disappointed and let down. But when she saw my post on social media, she realized it was all a lie and felt deeply deceived by him. That night, she confronted her husband, Mr. Sullivan, furious and demanding to know what kind of employees he was responsible for training. After hearing the full story from her, Mr. Sullivan was enraged and immediately contacted Anthony, the branch manager. Any employee who disgraces the bank's name in public should be fired immediately. With those words, he gave the order to Anthony. The next day, Anthony wasted no time and called Benjamin in for a formal hearing. It would have been best if Benjamin had told the truth, but instead, he lied through his teeth, saying she suddenly got emotional and said she was leaving. "I was just talking to her brother, and I have no idea what upset her." Honestly, those two didn't seem happy even during the engagement meeting. Maybe they planned this together to sabotage the wedding. Mary was also called in afterward and questioned by Anthony. With tears welling in her eyes, she said it was because he spoke disrespectfully to my brother. The nameplate at his seat said, "Poor middle school graduate brother." Benjamin told him directly that he didn't belong there because of his lack of education and asked him to leave. "My brother has been like a parent to me ever since we lost our father and mother. He gave up his own education so that I could stay in school and eventually graduate from college. After seeing him treated like that, I just couldn't stay there." Anthony compared both of their statements with what he had heard from Mrs. Sullivan and issued Benjamin a formal warning and a salary reduction. Seeing Benjamin's displeased expression, Anthony said to him with a sigh, "Mr. Sullivan ordered me to fire you. The only reason you're getting off with just a formal warning and a pay cut is because Mary asked us to be lenient. Without that, you wouldn't even be standing here right now." In fact, there was more to Mary's statement during the hearing. She bowed deeply and said, "Anthony, even so, it was thoughtless of me to leave that day without considering all the guests who had taken the time to come. That was my own shortcoming. So please, I ask that you show leniency toward Benjamin." Although Benjamin wasn't officially fired, his position became unbearable, a living nightmare. Several corporate clients he had been managing found out about the wedding incident and requested to terminate their business with the bank. The information network among the wives of the bank's upper management was far more extensive than anyone could have imagined, and both good and bad news spread rapidly. Many of my followers were from wealthy circles. While they never mentioned names publicly, Benjamin's name quickly spread for all the wrong reasons due to his disgraceful behavior. The bank barely managed to settle things by reassigning those accounts, but the disruption caused significant trouble for Benjamin's busy colleagues, and he soon became the target of cold stares. Even when he came to work, Benjamin was reduced to doing menial tasks behind the scenes to keep him out of public view, and his pride couldn't handle the humiliation. So in the end, he ended up resigning from the bank. His parents, who came from a wealthy family, were shocked when they heard the rumors and scolded him harshly. Despite their efforts, the bad reputation lingered, and in order to save face, they bowed their heads to Mary and me and said they would have Benjamin cover the wedding cancellation costs and pay compensation for the broken engagement. although Mary looked hesitant when I said, "He's the one who caused the wedding to be canceled, and you went through a lot because of him too. If his parents are offering, maybe it's okay to accept it." She gave a small nod and agreed to take it. After being disowned by his parents, Benjamin reportedly started living alone in a cheap apartment. He now works part-time while struggling to pay off the wedding cancellation fees and compensation. "I'm so sorry, Samuel. I didn't see him for who he really was. I should have known better, especially since he was going to be part of our family. If I had realized it sooner, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't have been dragged into it, and neither would anyone else." Mary apologizes to me every chance she gets. As a bank salesperson, Benjamin was a smooth talker who knew exactly how to manage his expressions and appearances. But whether it came from how he was raised or something ingrained in his personality, the moment he judged and discriminated against others based on their education, his true nature revealed itself. Honestly, I'm glad it happened at the wedding. If they had already registered their marriage or had a child before she discovered who he really was, Mary would have been lost, overwhelmed, and deeply hurt. In a way, I served as the lightning rod that drew out his real character, and if that spared Mary greater damage, then I'm okay with how things turned out. Mary, there are all kinds of people in this world, and no one can truly know what someone is really like inside. You were hurt this time, but I'm sure it was a valuable lesson. Think of it as Dad and Mom protecting you from heaven, and go find a new beginning. Next time, take your time and really get to know the person. As I looked at the photo of our smiling parents on the family altar, I gently spoke those words to Mary. She wiped away her tears and nodded with a smile. In the end, she canceled the lease on the apartment she was supposed to share with Benjamin and moved back into the apartment where I live. Mary bowed her head apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, Samuel. The apartment's going to feel a bit cramped with me living here, but I'll help out with the cleaning and cooking, so please let me stay for a while." But at the same time, I also felt genuinely happy, knowing I'd get to spend a little more time with Mary. "Samuel, I'm really glad I got to be your little sister." Suddenly, Mary spoke to me from behind. The words came so unexpectedly that I wasn't ready for them at all, and before I knew it, I tucked them deep into my heart. Tears welled up from the overwhelming happiness. I lowered my head to keep her from noticing and tried to hold back the tears, but my shoulders trembled and I couldn't stop sobbing. In that moment, I made a vow in my heart to always put Mary's happiness first, no matter what.